comes and the players come out. Webs of lies spinning from their mouths. Stop, look and listen for a little while. And you will see the friend behind their smile. Pay no attention to the men behind the curtain. Just look away when you see the blood spurting down to a steady drip. I promise to leave you a little bit. I'll be back for another drink tomorrow. I love the taste of your terror and your sorrow, bathing in your blood. It's never enough.
Hello and welcome to the Iron Mountain Hour. I hope you couldn't hear me and Tim talking during the intro, and I hope you can hear us now, but maybe you could and maybe you can't. So let's get this out of the way and hope that we can actually hear one another tonight. Last time we tried to do a Skype episode, we had a little bit of a technical glitch, but I think we've got that all cleared out, and we should be good to go now, I think. Tim should be running a stream live with us here, so he should be able to let me know very shortly. But we'd like to welcome you. It's Sunday, January the 16th, 2022. We are here in snowy Iron Mountain in Carter County, Tennessee. That's right, we're fixing to get hit by what they say is a big snowstorm. I've not really had a lot so far, although when I got up this morning, the road was completely covered, and my grass was just barely covered. But I had to turn off the traction control on the car to be able to, get enough wheel spin to pull myself up the hill out here. And then when I came back, it was okay. But in any case, it's supposed to come down more tonight. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for liking and sharing and subscribing to the videos. Last week's on the Appalachian Cryptids with our guest Wilbur Kilb was our best episode so far, I think, and it was our most popular episode so far. And during that episode, at the end of it, my microphone was cut off, but I did have from Mr. Wilbur, he donated this to the show, our new banner here, as you can see it, right here behind me, for the Iron Mountain Hour. Well, so we really appreciate him doing that. We really appreciate him being on the show. As I said, that was that video got our most views of any so far in the first week of it being up. Tim, are we live on the stream there? Are you able to hear me on it? Is anything happening?
Yeah, there is a time delay, so you sound good.
Okay.
So go ahead and talk for a little bit. Let me give this a second for it to catch up to where I'm talking.
All right, we'll make sure you're not echoing this
again.
time. We don't want that to happen again. That made the video damn near unwatchable, and we had some pretty interesting things in that one, so we definitely don't want that to happen again. We are working with a new audio setup. It should allow us to get a lot better quality audio and video to you, and when we're not in a remote setup like we are tonight with Tim, it should allow you all to call in and join the show. But with the snow supposed to be coming down, and I live like in the middle of Iron Mountain, about 2,000 feet up, so pretty, 2/3 of the way up or a little over. So it's kind of snowy up here. I would hate for Tim to get stuck, but in any case, we're doing this one through the wonders of technology. The magical telescreen allows Tim and I to talk to one another and share our conversation with you. You can still get on the conversation in the chat here. I've got it pulled up right in front of me. It should be easy to, as long as everything shows up like it's supposed to keep an eye on that and not join the chat really, but read it and at least talk to y'all if you're cool enough to drop a comment. So anyway, Tim, were you able to hear yourself when you came back around there in the stream?
Yeah, that sounds, I think, as good as I'm going
No
to
echoes?
over a phone. Nope, no echo.
All right. Well, before we get started on tonight's topic, which is the old switcheroo, I want to look at some of the things that are changing up in the media narratives that we talked about. It's kind of some of these things where you'll see a lot of people saying the conspiracy theorists they got lucky and were right again. But at the same time, there were a lot of people out here who weren't conspiracy theorists putting out a lot of these ideas, who were experts in their fields, and that's who the so-called conspiracy theorists were listening to. So it's not surprising that a lot of people did get some of these calls right as far as what we might be dealing with the pandemic in the future. So I want to go into some of that, but I thought it was pretty interesting in the last episode, or not the last episode, the one before where we had the audio issues. We got into a little bit about how things were done in the dead of winter, and we talked some about media or media manipulation and mass formation psychosis. I had seen this term going around, and I read a little bit on it going into that episode because I see why it was going around. As we spoke of in that episode, a lot of non-player characters, as they're often referred, will kind of parrot the same talking points and not necessarily seem to know what they're talking about, but it's kind of the same thing that you hear on the news all the time. And there's rarely an explanation given, or rarely any further study done on the base level of this. So after we talked about that and we explained a little bit about what mass formation was and what some of the steps of it were, that Friday after our broadcast, Joe Rogan had on his podcast Dr. Robert Malone, who is famous for being one of the main inventors of the mRNA technology used in the Pfizer, BioNTech, the Moderna vaccines. He was part of the team that developed that technology, and he's kind of been making the rounds. And he's come out against a lot of the policies that have been enacted for the implementation of these shots. So Dr. Malone was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he brought up the paper that I had studied a little bit about mass formation psychosis after I had heard about it. You know, people were talking about it in kind of conspiracy circles on the internet, so I looked it up. And Malone, he commented that paper, and he talked about some of the things that were in it, some of the very same things that we got into on the show that Sunday. And then it was really funny because you started seeing the memes come out. They were showing all the NPCs with media logos above their heads saying there's no such thing as mass formation. There's no such thing as mass formation. And I got to looking, and someone had collected a group of stories where in 2017 through 2020, several major large-scale corporate media outlets were suggesting that Donald Trump was hypnotizing his followers using mob mass hysteria or mass psychosis. And so it's pretty interesting that another example of what do you call it, double speak, or no, I guess it's more of gaslighting in this case, because they tell us that there's a problem and this guy is doing it, and we say, okay, well now this guy's doing it, and they say, oh no, there's no such thing as that. So that does remind me of 1984. If you get into the Newspeak dictionary and kind of the appendix of the book, they explain how all that works. But it really is a manipulative technique, and the media use it to great effect. In effect, it was like everybody was turned into an NPC saying there is no such thing as mass formation psychosis. And you saw several stories out of that. But if you're interested in that, you can look it up yourself. They're not memory holing it yet, so you can still find these stories. Winston Smith hasn't wadded up the newspaper and thrown it into the incinerator. But before we get into all that, I did want to bring up a couple of local stories here. I thought this was interesting that Tim, I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but I'm gonna pull it up to where our viewers can here in just a second. But actually, I'll just skip this one. But in Bristol, the toxicology report came in, and they said that it was not benzene that was bothering people's respiratory tracts and things like this. The toxicologist, Dr. Laura Green, reiterated that the landfill odor is not causing long-term health effects. And benzene was detected at high levels in the air, but it is not the cause of short-term health effects. These kind of short-term health effects are mostly caused by other compounds, the biodegradation products of the garbage, she says. Well, I don't really think it really matters to most folks whether it's benzene or something else. They apparently.
Well, I think, you see, she's going into like legal mode there, because the argument that the citizens are trying to make to get the landfill taken care of is they're saying that it is literally harmful in a chemical sense, that the gas is toxic and it's causing damage. And I guess that would be the way I guess I would go about it too if I lived over there and I was trying to get things changed. But I really don't think it need it to be physically lethal for them to get it to change, because you could really argue that it's psychologically
Oh
damaging
my gosh,
for
yeah.
the city to always have to smell baby poop all the
Oh
time.
man, and probably baby poop is the best of it. I wonder what it is that. I wonder why that one's so bad, because the Elizabethton and Johnson City, Carter County landfills, they stink, but it's never been to where like I could smell it from miles away and it's making my eyes burn.
I'm wondering if it's proximity.
Yeah. Is it more in a
I've never
residential
taken the
area?
time to find out where the Bristol stink pit is. I mean, really, the one in Carter County is hidden pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they've just piled so much dirt up around it that it looks like a giant crater, or I mean, I don't know how they've got that situated. But you got to drive in there way up in there a little bit, and the way I've smelled it myself in Bristol, it smells like it's pretty close. So I'm wondering if it's a proximity issue.
Yeah. Well, the Johnson City
what-
one.
Okay.
The Johnson City one right there off of Main Street, as you go down the hill from the old Elizabethton Highway there. I mean, you can smell that one sometimes, but I think I've heard that's actually more often the crematorium that's there that you actually smell more than the landfill. But the landfill is up on the big top of that big hill there.
I mean, that is a good question. What would make one landfill stink more than another one? Because you would think that Johnson City's and Kingsport's would be just as bad because they're the same size. I guess you could argue that Kingsport's Eastman is just, maybe covering up the smell of it, but Johnson City doesn't have that problem.
Now I think it's I've always heard the paper mill that actually makes all that smell over there. That Eastman isn't what makes the smell. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard. So yeah, they enlisted an internationally recognized landfill expert to tackle odors. Now this must be somebody who really gets around these landfill expert circles, and hobnobs with the bigwig landfill experts. It kind of makes me think of that show Parks and Recreation, where they have all these big, government functions where they take each other so seriously. But they're having this guy come in, or this person come in. Well, now it's not wanting me to let me see the story. But in any case, they found that it's not benzene, and they're saying that it's not causing actual harm to people. But I mean, if your eyes are burning and things like this, you're having a hard time sleeping, it's gonna be something serious. Dr. Craig Benson, that's the guy's name. He's coming in this week. He's coming in this coming week.
It's like we're.
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
What was that?
I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you stopped. Like your mic went silent there for a second. I was seeing if he's going to cut back in.
Oh, okay. Well, in any case, they're bringing in an expert, Dr. Craig Benson. He's a superstar landfill investigator, so maybe they'll figure it out, and those folks over there in Bristol will get some release or some relief.
Well, I mean, I guess that would be the appropriate step to bring in a professional, because, like I said, it doesn't make sense to me that a landfill would stink so bad that one city complains and another doesn't.
Yeah. Well, moving on from that, well, hey, WJHL wants to know.
We're going to call the switcheroo.
Yeah, well, we'll get into the switcheroo. I wanted to go talk a couple more things real quick, a couple more local ideas. So this is a question for y'all in the audience. WJHL wants to know this, and I'm kind of curious about it too. So if anybody wants to participate in the chat here, that'd be pretty cool. Half of North Carolinians, when surveyed, they said they would not stop. Actually, 42% of them said they would stop in a snowstorm to help someone. Most of the states with bad snow, like Idaho, Montana, they were up around 90% of people would stop to help someone, and North Carolina was lower at 42%. I wonder how Tennessee would fare. Would you stop and help somebody in a snowstorm in Tennessee or Virginia? So if you want to comment your state, chat your answer to that, and also, have you ever picked up a hitchhiker? So that'd be something that we could talk about coming up to in the next episode. So in this chat, again, but if you would help someone in a snowstorm, and in a future episode, I want to hear from the audience about whether you would pick up a hitchhiker or whether you have ever picked up a hitchhiker before. It's a totally different world than when hitchhiking was a real prominent thing. I know my dad and his brothers, they hitchhiked a lot growing up. My uncle actually hitchhiked from Romulus, New York, back down to southwestern Virginia, and that was a pretty common thing for young men and older, teenage boys to do. But they were still, it was pretty perilous at times for them even then, and now it's kind of gone by the wayside. So they'll do that in a future episode. Have you ever hitchhiked? Would you ever pick up a hitchhiker? Now I want to get into the main theme of the show tonight, which is the old switcheroo. And that's what we titled the episode. One of the reasons that I brought this up lately is because I've seen a lot of news coverage changing, and a lot of actually the government change the way they're talking about the federal response to COVID. Tim, have you seen some of this?
No.
No.
Honestly, I've just been
Okay.
very occupied for the last couple of weeks and kind of tuned out of the actual serious news. But I have theories. If you could throw a couple of examples how you're seeing a shift in the way they're handling it, I'd be glad to.
Well, I have an NPR story here. Let's see if I can put that up in front of the screen there. I think that's showing on the screen here. This is from January 1st, and it was a couple of days before that, Biden had said there is no federal solution to the pandemic. And that kind of goes back to what President Trump was saying when he was in office. That was to kind of back off and let the states handle these things, and he didn't want to. He didn't want states to lock down, but he didn't try to use the federal government to force them not to. And Biden kind of said that was wrong, and that he would use the power of the federal government to kind of make have a unified response. But after over a year or almost a year in office there, he's decided that there's no federal solution to the pandemic. And if you want to look him up saying that, you can. You can also Google NPR. You can get the transcripts from it right there. We're not going to go over all that in detail. That's just one quick example. Another one we have here, this is something that has been talked about a lot in quote-unquote conspiracy circles, and that was that the death counts may be overinflated as people die of other things, and people have tested positive for the virus while they're in the hospital for other problems and things like this, leading to a bigger count than what we should really have. And we have this from Dr. Rochelle Wolinski. She is the director of President Biden's CDC. Let's listen to what she has to say real quick. Oh, restart it.
Occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. So really these are people who were unwell to begin with. And yes, really encouraging news in the context of Omicron. This means not only...
Okay, so that was kind of, if you were saying that for a year ago, you could get banned off Twitter for saying that, or banned off of YouTube for saying that. We'll see. We'll test. I think our channel is just not really big enough right now, so I think we can kind of get away with stuff and see. Hopefully they don't pop up and give us a whole bunch of strikes at once. She couldn't hear Rochelle Wolinski. So
for like referring to the news or what?
Okay, hang on just a second. So people couldn't hear that last video. My bad, y'all. So I'm gonna put that back up again real quick. Let me unmute I want to make sure I don't have this echo effect going on with you, Tim. So hang on just a second while I play this video, and then I'll mute it back again. So okay. Here we'll go back to Rochelle Wolinski. The CDC.
Illness. Given that, is it time to start rethinking how we're living with this virus, that it's potentially here to stay?
The overwhelming number of deaths, over 75%, occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. So really, these are people who were unwell to begin with. And yes, really encouraging news in the context of Omicron. This means not only...
So there we have it. I hope the folks watching the video could hear it that time. Sorry about that if you couldn't hear it the first time. I really didn't want to get Tim echoing again, so I've got to keep that muted. I had that muted for the video. So, yeah, Rochelle Wolinski, she basically said, what would get you booted off of Twitter or YouTube about a year ago, if you were a big channel, that is. Like I said, I don't think ours is really big enough to be making those kind of waves unless somebody reports it. And I don't want to be this kind of channel to enrage people enough to report it, but there are going to be people who don't like what we're saying and may report it.
You think a lot of it's just bots, though?
Yeah.
That just grab onto
the code words,
like red words, and they just drop them out immediately.
Yeah.
Like, I think it might have a lot more to do with that too. And like, if we're showing a news report, they're not going to get us for that. But I know there's some words you really shouldn't say. Like, it's really weird that there's now internet words. You know.
Yeah, I try to remember to use jibba-jabs or something like that, or jibber-jabbers.
They want you to avoid certain words. The algorithm is what's looking for it. There's not a giant army of people just watching streams. I don't think.
I don't think there is either. I think the algorithm trips when they find those words, and then it goes on to sometimes manual review and other times not. But there's so many channels out there making so much content that it it's kind of hard to stop the signal, because there's so many. You cut off one head and 5 more grow. And I can't wait to start getting onto some other channels as we build the audience some. I think what I'm going to do between this week and next week is set up a Discord for us. That way we can use that for calls, and we can also use it to build the community outside of the stream. That way, if you're watching the stream at a later time and you want to post on it, or we could do a Telegram channel. Y'all give us your thoughts in the comments whether you'd rather use Discord or Telegram. I think that we can use Discord I'm pretty sure we can use Discord for audio calling, but if nobody uses it, I want to use what people are using.
Well, it's more like, I think more about universality.
Yeah.
Like, I know Skype calls, when I've seen large groups of what looks like 4 heads in a box, like the Brady Bunch talking, Skype does not allow very much volume. So, like, if me and you start talking over each other, like, we both like kick down real quick, whereas that doesn't seem to be as much of a problem with Zoom, and even less of a problem with, I think, Discord. I've never had a Discord, I don't think, but here's my conspiracy theory with it, or I heard from the witch doctor rather, was that Discord was designed to honeypot people. Like, they busted quite a few like zoophile groups and child pedophilia groups exchanging CP, I guess you'd have to say that. We're going to fire back our algorithm talk. But Discord's been used quite a bit to catch groups of people doing not so good things, especially the anal community, which is, I don't really want to go.
I have not heard that about Discord, man.
But they've busted quite a few groups of people doing that.
Using Discord. I had Discord because we had this survival game called Conan Exiles for the PS4, and part of the rules of gaining access to this one server where you didn't have to worry about people killing you every 5 seconds was that you had to join the Discord. And it was a pretty handy tool because you could share all the rules. Everybody could share stuff anytime. You could do video calls, you could do voice calls. We could probably patch that into the show. So yeah, let us know. Would you rather use something like Discord? Would you rather use, there's also one called Gilded that's very similar I think we could use, or would you want me to start a subreddit? I think Discord is probably the most popular as far as people using it for streams. But again, if nobody's on it that watches us, I don't know what good that'll do us. So anyway, back to, we had Dr. Wolinski saying kind of the same thing, that that a lot of us had been saying, that although this thing is serious and it's not to be taken lightly, it is being used to generate fear, to cause people to give over authority that they wouldn't normally give up. And we even saw, with the emergency declarations, we saw lots of mandates coming from governors, coming from mayors, coming without votes from city councils, without representation. We saw a lot of people follow, CDC examples straight from the top throughout the country, and we didn't see kind of the magic of our 50-state citizen or system and our private healthcare system, where they all worked on different things for a long time. We kind of had one lockstep driven approach, a pharmaceutical driven approach to it, and of course we need pharmaceuticals to deal with something like this. But in any case, there was very little room for innovation allowed on the small scale. Everything kind of happened on the large scale. So there was not a lot of room for people to talk about the fact that people's other health conditions could be really contributing to this. And I've said that during the 2 years almost since this has started, think how much weight people could lose, and think how much healthier people could be if they did things like whatever, stop smoking or whatever bad habits that they had, if they had been told up front that this is one of the main contributing factors to you having to worry about this disease, is if you are overweight or have your diabetes out of control or have heart disease. And these are all things, if you are really scared of and you're really concerned with, you could have made a heck of a difference in your lifestyle in those 2 years. Now, right now, you're still just wearing a mask and hoping that your shot works, where realistically, it was in your control, and that was never allowed to be said. So Rochelle Wolinski kind of just put that back out there. And if we look here at, whoops, kind of made that a little too big there. But if we look here, this is from the CDC's website. We can see that 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause mission from, this is the death data from 2020. There were on average an additional 2.9 conditions or causes of death on each of those COVID cases. So it was there were always other factors leading to that death number being so high. And you had things like the hospitals having to shut down for pretty much everything else, so they had to get the money to come in somehow. So only thing I can figure is a lot of them categorized a lot of these positive tests on people who died of other things as COVID to be able to keep the money flowing in and keep the doors open. Because as we saw in 2020, we had a whole lot of dance routines, and we had people missing cancer screenings, missing colonoscopies, and routine visits that often detect many disease as the precautions were taken for the pandemic. There were a lot of untold damage from that. We really don't know yet what all has happened from that. We do know that there have been a lot of serious side effects around the world from the shutdowns, with the UN estimating that 35 million extra people died of starvation in the third world due to food not being able to make it to them. And we're starting to see those supply chain problems really make it really hitting home here, because we're seeing the grocery store shelves. If you've been to the grocery store lately, I'm sure you've seen it's not full like it usually is. I mean, there's still stuff there. You can still get food, but there's definitely less things. And some of the big cities you'll see just completely empty shelves, especially the meat. Have you seen some of that, Tim?
Yeah. I've been kind of buying as we need. I've not seen anything that was completely empty, but if you go to the food city up the road here, there's only a handful of different kinds of cat food and dog food and stuff. You can get what you want, but you're not going to get to pick what you want.
There's a
you
lot
can go
less
get
choice.
ketchup. You're getting one brand, and maybe you got two sizes that you can choose from, that sort of thing. Man, I think that what you was talking about earlier about, I know we're talking about the mass psychosis thing. We can we can show examples of that in real time. Like I sent you a text earlier today. Like that's the best example that I can think of. That's like personally, it's an anecdotal. But back in the late '80s, early '90s, when they found out that they were like Satanists in Hollywood, and and back then, like everybody that wasn't in a church thought that was laughable. They were like, "Yeah, you don't understand what Satanist is. It's just the doest thou wilt guys. You know, they're anarchists and that sort of thing." And it turned out the Christians were right. There's some pretty nefarious people in those positions. But what happened was the further, I don't even want to say right leaning because that's not even the case. It's more just the radicalized part of Christians decided that since they found out that there were literal Satanists in Hollywood, that they were going to burn all of our toys and you were not allowed to watch TV. And Pokemon is the spirits of Satan. I don't even know how much of that might even be true, but they took it so far that they made the idea of all these things ridiculous. And it looks exactly the same thing that's happening right now with a lot of these poor people that I guess you would call woke, even though that's kind of a cringe buzzword. I feel bad for a lot of those people because they're having kind of like an early part of their life hijacked, getting put into like a radicalized movement. They're going to have a lot of buyer's remorse over that. And I think that's what you see with a lot of this vaccine stuff and why people cling to things so long is they don't want to be wrong, especially when it has so much to do with their identity and how much they had to give up of themselves to be a part of the movement or whatever, you know. And but I think a lot of the mass psychosis that is going on right now has a whole lot to do with the reason people don't want to give up so quickly on believing sort of odd things is there is a sort of willingness to being psychotic, as strange as that might sound. Like, in order for you to believe something, okay, well, let's play a mental game to make this not boring. If we pretend for a second that all of our Ninja Turtle figures and Pogs, just the most arbitrary stuff that you would think, were being burned in giant bonfires. That probably might sound crazy if any younger people stumble across that, but that was a real thing that in the late, like 1990, churches had giant bonfires and they were throwing like people's toys and CDs
what
and
was
stuff
the main thing?
It's like a giant purge.
What was the main thing they were burning? Was it Pogs?
It changed multiple times. Like I was in a pretty strange church. They literally burned everything, like just all of it. And they called it, if it was secular, that was the word we would use.
Worldly.
And but that's kind of what's going on the reverse right now with the Church of Woke. I don't know what you'd call it. Everything has a test that it's leaned up against, and if it doesn't pass 100% purity, they purge it. And once you start playing that slippery slope game, it's really quickly where people start getting addicted more to the idea of how good they feel when they give something up like that. Like, because like you feel horrible burning all your toys as a kid, but when you see like 300 people like being like, "Yeah, you did something good," like it gives you something like a dopamine rush in a different way. Like you feel accepted, and it's you're part of the group now. But you had to give up something to be a part of the group, and so that's why it's so hard to leave the group because you lost something that you cared about.
You did a ritual.
Get into this thing. So yeah, if you leave the group now, you're out everything because you gave up something to be a part of it. So that has a lot to do with why it's mass psychosis. It's a group of people willingly kind of putting themselves in a crazy position.
Let's look.
I've been there. It's weird. It's weird to see people doing that.
Let's look at a couple of this little infographic or whatever you want to call it here of some of the talking points from, or the known, I guess, the facts, I guess you would say, or the speakable truths. So let's look at it anyway. From a year ago, the vaccinated can't spread COVID or can spread COVID was considered a hoax. Now we know, of course, that everybody can. The vaccinated are susceptible to new variants and reinfection. A year ago, that was called a hoax. Now we're able to say that on YouTube and Twitter. Hopefully, they won't pull us down for saying that. The COVID vaccines can cause bloodshot clots and other serious side effects. It says a year ago that was a hoax. That's come out that's true in some cases. The third and fourth shot, people said no, they're not going to have that. Now that obviously that has happened. I think in Israel you're required to have you're forced to be able to participate in society, and lots of places, lots of countries are required to have the third. New shots every year or half year. Well, now we know that's the case. Shots for young children. Yep, they want to do it for 5 to 11-year-olds now. And if we look real quick at the COVID deaths that we had through April 2021, we had, I don't think you can see my infographic here, Tim. I forgot to share my screen with you. But if we,
No, I
okay,
can see
cool. We got
I can see it.
we got 1 to 4 years old. Drowning is the most common cause of death, 2.8 out of every 100,000. Down to suffocation at 0.7 times out of every 100,000. COVID down to 0.2 times out of every 100,000. If we look at 5 to 14-year-olds, the cause of death for them are 2.1 out of every 100,000 for cancer. You go down to flu and pneumonia at 0.3% or 0.3 out of every 100,000. And COVID is right there with suffocation, a little bit higher, both statistically tied at 0.2 for 100,000 people. So it's really not a risk for most children, and the vaccination, or let's really test it here, the shot does not stop transmission. According to even the manufacturers of it, they say it will reduce the severity of your symptoms and maybe reduce the length and lessen your chance to be hospitalized or die. So there is some data to back that up, guys. A lot of the people in the conspiracy, world don't want to look it up, but there's some data that does back that up. I'm not sure that it's definitively proven or anything like that, but some of it that's not crazy out there does show that. But in any case, if some of the worst things they're saying about this jabs are true, then the trade-off would still not be worth it. So it's hard to know what to believe, but YouTube will only let me say so much on that. In any case, I do know I can't go any further than that, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So show you one more meme real quick here. 2020, the masked guy says you're a conspiracy theorist, and Chad over here says deaths with and from COVID shouldn't be the same. And then the masked guy says you're so selfish, and Chad here says COVID is mostly affecting the elderly and sick. Why can't I open my restaurant or send my kid back to school? Masked guy says, why are you attacking science? And Chad says the vaccines aren't stopping COVID transmission. And then in 2022, the masked guy, he's taking his mask off, and he says, actually, you were right. And Chad says, get away from my family. But that goes right with what we saw from the CDC. Now, real quick, before we get into the old switcheroo and where that may or may not be going, I wanted to show you this story, Tim. Maybe you could comment on it. I'm going to have, we've got a guest coming up, Seth Green of Greener Pastures. We're going to talk about how cannabis and hemp has helped him with his health problems that included cerebral palsy and several other things that he's been unable to find effective treatment for until he started using cannabis. And then he became an advocate for it, going to Washington, D.C. He's been on television. A lot of you probably know Seth. I've known him for years, and he's a really cool guy. And it'll be good to have him on to discuss. He used to be real active in kind of the marijuana legislation and medical marijuana pushing. He's kind of taken a break from that. So he said he's not really up on the laws and stuff like he used to be. But I just want to get him on to talk about how it helped him and give some people who may not have seen it another perspective on it. So with that in mind, I had this story here from the New York Post that says, the Sisters of the Valley weed nuns praise study stating that pot can prevent COVID-19. It's wonderful progress to have the scientific community say we're already determined that there are compounds in hemp that can prevent infection, so now we can get on to studying dosage, said the nun, whose legal name is Christine Messine. That's progress. And here's the nuns rolling up and token up here in the name of progress. The Sister of the Valley is not related to the Catholic Church. It grows its own pot and smokes it. They said the compounds cannabidiol cannabigerolic and cannabinolic acids could prevent and treat COVID-19. They're not controlled substances like THC, the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, and have a good safety profile in humans. It's a Northern California-based feminist collective, the Sisters of the Valley. It grows its own pot and creates holistic health products. And they started with just 12 plants, but grew to over $1 million in annual revenue before the pandemic. So have you heard about that? That there was a study that said that pot could somehow stop the spike protein from being able to catch on in the lungs. Did you hear anything about that?
No.
I didn't read it.
I had quite a like marijuana research when I was in college and stuff. I think cannabis is absolutely a very medicinal plant. I do think it's sort of like going through, like, remember like kale is kind of getting that treatment there for a while, where like just because something is good in one way, like yes, kale is great, but you probably shouldn't be making milkshakes out of it, for example.
At least not
and
making
like,
it your main vegetable.
like topical THC, for example, like it doesn't work. So they're saying like rub like CBD oil all over your, like it can't, like if it's pain relief, it can't penetrate. Like if you're doing it for other purposes like moisturization, I guess you could argue that. But like it's so thick it can't penetrate the skin and get into the blood. So to get the pain relief from like Delta 9, you actually have to ingest it. So there is a little bit squirrely when you eat cannabis, but there are like some immune boosting properties to cannabis in general. So I don't think we should be parsing it up the way we are and trying to figure out what the best part of it is, because I think it's probably like apples. You want to eat the apple, and the sugar inside the apple is good for you too. But when you extract an acre's worth of apples and put it to a 5-pound brick, that's when you start running into some squirrely problems, you know?
Well, one more, before I got into this, oh no, I'm going to save that one for last, actually. So I wanted to get back into, we did an episode, I think it was episode 6, and it was entitled Resetting the Board and Resisting the Borg. And it was about what's been called Operation Lockstep. It's really just one part of a larger program, which was from a paper put out by the Rockefeller Foundation in 2010, if I can get my mouse to not be squirrely here, called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And in that show, before we had the ability to show you on the screen like we do now, we discussed Lockstep, part of this plan. And we also told you that it's several pieces. Lockstep is just one part. And the scenario framework is basically a plan for global cooperation directed by one body, basically the UN, and it's funded by lots of private corporations. And we saw just recently Prince Charles of Great Britain saying that we needed a new Marshall Plan and basically making a military operation to fight COVID-19 the worldwide. And part of that includes Lockstep. And this is a really kind of a scary looking little graphic here, but this is actually the Rockefeller Foundation. This looks like something that like a conspiracy theorist made up to make Lockstep look creepy. Don't you think it looks kind of creepy there?
You mean the
little graphic there that I just showed, that with the I'll put it back on the screen there again, with Lockstep, Clever Together, Hack Attack.
It doesn't look like something. Yeah, it looks creepy. I'll just put it that way.
I mean, that doesn't look like something that somebody that wants you to adopt this paper would put out. It kind of looks like somebody who was against it would put out. And this is like this is a different kind of. It looks like the political compass meme, but it shows the political and economic alignment with strong and weak. They want to have strong for Lockstep and low adaptive capacity in Lockstep. So they're looking at different versions going forward. I think we've been in Lockstep, as we've seen, with several nations around the world going to adopting the term "Build Back Better" as we come out of the pandemic, and as different changes are being made worldwide to deal with it. We saw the World Economic Forum using that language after the Great Reset kind of began being talked about. The World Build Back Better started making its way around Europe, and it suddenly became, as we talked before, then candidate Joe Biden's campaign slogan going into the 2020 election. And as we saw that happen, we saw similar pandemic restrictions implemented in many of the countries in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada. A lot of these places are going with digital ID requirements for in order to prove that you have had the shot in order to get into certain places. You have to show them your ID to prove that you are the person who is referred to in the digital document. You have to show them the digital scan so that you can prove that you have had the shot. And then a lot of places you actually have to have a negative test in addition to that, because originally they said the scan, or it'll be shot or test. And then it ends up pretty much being both now. So lots of places in Europe, in particular, in Austria, they're in Germany, they're keeping people out of food markets. In Canada, I've even seen somebody get not allowed into a farmer's market, an outdoor farmer's market, for not having his card. So I would call that damn near lockstep when you see most of the American world, or west of the Western world, without the Americas in full. We do see that. We see it in New York, we see it in Boston, we see it in Chicago, and we see it, I think, in San Francisco, and there's somewhere in Washington that is talking about doing that too. So it's pretty troubling to see all this come down, especially when you see some of the other ideas that they have for us in Lockstep, and what the World Economic Forum has referred to before. Their president, Klaus Schwab, saying that we are going to basically be very angry, and that part of moving forward from COVID-19 is going to be dealing with that anger as they lock down, because we're going to have less. And that's where I'm going to get into the next part of this strategy, which is clever together. Now, when we first started this show, we did an episode on the smart poles coming to Johnson City, Tennessee. And we went over several reasons why I didn't like them and why I felt like everybody needed to know about them. Now, when we started the podcast, we did almost as many views on that video about smart poles as WJHL did at the time. Now, of course, they are a larger company, so they've built up more views than we have in the meantime. But still not too many people, considering I think only about 400 people have seen their video about the smart poles. And then there was a follow-up a couple months later. But they were generally spoken of as a good thing and a solution to some problems that the community had expressed as far as crime in the downtown area. They were said they were going to be used to keep an eye on the place, to be able to track parking and traffic, to basically allow the police to know when there's an incident that they need to respond to more quickly. But in addition to that, we also see that smart poles are being installed worldwide, and they are using sensors that track people who walk by them. There's a Wi-Fi. If your phone's set to automatic connect, you'll hook up to that Wi-Fi immediately, and they will be able to see whatever you're doing while you're on the internet there. They'll also be able to tell your phone's IP from your friend's IP, see who you're with. That seems like, pretty intrusive for the city to be tracking that and then selling it to the TVA, which is a corporation, a private corporation that is owned by the federal government. So that seems like something that's kind of shady to begin with. But as we see this, and I have questions about this and real concerns about it, it seems downright Orwellian, and you could say, well, you already have the tracking device with you. But this is the government actually wanting access to it through a private corporation that they control. So it's a little bit different than having Verizon or having Comcast or whoever your Sprint, whoever your provider may be. They have access to that, but the government still has to have warrants to be able to get to it. Where we're talking with the federal government owning the TVA here, and they're going to have access to whatever data that these smart poles collect, and we still haven't been told exactly what that is. But as I've talked about when we got into these smart poles is part of a much larger agenda, and part of this is it is a piece of the scenarios for future technology, and that's Clever Together. And Clever Together was basically devised as a way to control the world's the developing countries as they gain access to technology and energy. They want to make sure that those guys start using sustainable energy as opposed to building new coal plants and power plants. So part of that is that they want to have this be a worldwide effort to cut these things down. And I'm definitely for cutting down on pollution, but we have a very large population in the world, and as they grow, so far, alternative and sustainable energy projects have not been able to keep up the demand. That's why nations like China and India are building coal-fired power plants at such a quick rate, and they're doing that regardless of what the West does with our energy policy. But in any case, part of Clever Together is basically getting the world into. This was something that was talked about a lot particularly in right-wing or Republican circles around the 2008, 2010, 12 elections. They talked about something called cap and trade. And one of the ways that they got this was from this document where we talked about a system of having a limit on how much energy one is allowed to use and how much carbon one is allowed to produce. And at a certain point, you reach your limit, and you can pay to go over that limit. So basically, a large corporation would have the ability to use as much carbon as they want as long as they paid the government, and a smaller person or business would not be able to. And they would effectively be controlled by this. And a big part of that was installing the smart meters and the smart systems, the smart cities. And when we talked about the Johnson City story with the smart poles, in the second installment that we brought that up, we gave you an update where the poles were going to be in King Commons and in Founders Park here in Johnson City. But we also gave you an update on when I think his name was Jeff Dyson or Jeff Dykes. He said the quiet part out loud that we want to get smart homes and we want to get smart appliances and we want to get a reading back from everything you're doing and each thing. And I was talking to a couple of people after the podcast this last week, and they were telling me that here in Elizabethton, that they had the power company come by and put a smart meter on their home. And I have not heard anything about this, but as I got ready for tonight's show, I've got a visitor here. I've got a guest here. Orville Redenborker has made his way into the studio. He has broken in. He's broken down the barricade. He's wearing his tank top. He's ready. He's a gym bro. Let him loose here. But as I was getting ready for tonight's show, I did a little bit more searching, and I came across a story from the Elizabethton Star. I think it is. Well, I've lost the story. But this was a story back from July of 2021 that Elizabethton was actually going to be putting in these smart meters on everybody's house. So part of... Okay, here it is. Sorry about that. A much-awaited changeover. Elizabethton electric meter swap to benefit customer and utility. So they say basically that we'll be able to keep an eye on if somebody's power goes out quickly, they'll be able to restore it quickly. If somebody's using too much energy and they think there may be a problem, they can shut it down or whatever. They got a lot of, basically it allows the energy company to have a lot more monitoring and control, which is kind of what the whole smart city agenda is about. And if we go into the Rockefeller document of Clever Together, it's about doing that in order to be able to restrict the movement of your average person, to be able to restrict and control and monitor mankind on a global scale, so that basically if you are a mega corporation or an NGO or government head, you can pay the fine to get out of the carbon restrictions that will prevent the rest of us from being able to move freely. So I'll post a link to this PDF it's the Clever Together section of scenarios for future technology and international development. They actually give you, it's a made-up scenario that they came up with 12 years ago that has a pandemic and the government response to it, and how that basically will be used to be able to implement a lot of these other measures, such as Clever Together. And on another episode, we'll talk about smart cities, or smart scramble and hack attack. Those were the two of the other ways that this scenario went. Now, while we're talking about Clever Together, I do want to go ahead and say this is I think this is the part that we're going through right now. Is the Clever Together scenario, as we see the smart cities come in, the smart meters go in, smart appliances come in. It'll probably be hard to order an appliance soon that doesn't have the internet connectivity in it. Almost all the TVs now are smart. You almost don't see one at all that's not Wi-Fi compatible and has all the Alexa and voice assistants and all this stuff on it. It's pretty much all connected together now. And the barriers are being removed between private companies and the government. They were pretty thin anyway, with seed money coming from NQTEL and DARPA for most of your major tech platforms. But now you could say that the government is basically using those as arms of its own in its own way. So yeah, check that. I'll put that in the link after the episode. Check that out. See if you recognize any of the things that they talk about there, because it sure looks like to me that we're experiencing exactly what they planned. And when we look at history, we look at something called, we've mentioned it in this show before, the Hegelian dialectic, and that is, you have something that you want to do, you as a ruling authority, as a government, as a king, as a clergy, high-level clergy, whatever it may be, you have an objective that you want to achieve. So what do? You can't, a lot of times, if that objective includes seizing more power or authority for yourself, you can't just do that without a reason. So what you do is you have a play at hand, so that when something happens to allow you to use that play to gain more authority, you can do it, or you can create for yourself the play which gives you the ability to have more authority. So in this scenario, we have the Lockstep just waiting for a pandemic. This is things that they've wanted to do for a long time, but they have an excuse for it. If a pandemic comes along, then they can roll out these measures that they've discussed in Lockstep, and people won't question their motivation as much as they would if they just came out with these ideas with no impetus, such as a global pandemic. So, go ahead, Tim.
Have you seen because the pamphlet that you had up there, you said it didn't look positive. Have you seen the Illuminati card game from back in the 90s?
That's fascinating.
Look at if you can, look at those images and tell me that the pamphlet doesn't look reminiscent of the
artwork. You're right, it does.
Doesn't it?
No, I see what you mean. I'll see if I can pull that up real quick. My dogs are going crazy.
That was a weird one. It's pretty expensive. You can get some of the original ones. It's pretty expensive if you get one of the newer releases too. I'm thinking about getting one just so I can look through it. You can pull all the images up on like Google, and it'll show all the cards in like a giant block. Yeah. But just the art style and the way it was, on the way that pamphlet is made, I was like, that looks like sections of that card
you're right.
game.
Let me look at. Man, my dogs are going crazy about something upstairs. I'll show you a picture real quick there, guys. There's what he was talking about with the Illuminati card games. If you'll take a look at that artwork there, and then we'll look at the Rockefeller Foundation, their axis here. I mean, everything in it. Just look at this. Are those not like the creepiest looking cameras you've ever seen in your life? That's what they have on the streets of London, man. All up and down. They have just cameras pointing everywhere. And I feel like that's pretty much what they want us to do here in our area, and pretty much everywhere. They want to be able to keep an eye on everything.
New York City has cameras like that. Of course, DC made sense that there was so many cameras. It was still weird then, but it is more alarming to see that amount of cameras starting to pop up in other areas. Because good Lord, can you imagine what DC is like
I've
now?
not been up there in years.
There's that many cameras in Gotham City.
But
they've probably got like people's mailboxes and nanobots. That's probably what our stink bugs are. It's probably just nanobots.
they don't look natural, do they?
6 months.
Let's see, man. We got back to that artwork there. It does really look like a lot like those card games. So one of the next things that I heard talked about a lot over the last year is Klaus Schwab. He's the head of the World Economic Forum. He wrote the book COVID-19 and the Great Reset, and he's the head of the group that's laying out a lot of this agenda. And one of the things that he talked about after COVID-19 started was cybersecurity and the global cyber attack. And he really seems to feel that's something that's going to happen. So that's something that I think we should be watching the news for and seeing what we see. Might be good to be prepared, to go without electricity, because a lot of the things that Klaus said happened during COVID-19. A lot of those responses went into place. They had the Cyber Polygon exercise last year, where they basically they set up a plan to have secure ecosystem development to where basically they control the whole internet and web system, and it's less likely to be able to be hacked. So I really think since they were preparing for that, just like they were preparing for with Event 201 and the SPARS pandemic drills and Lockstep and the Wuhan Event 201, if they were preparing for that and a lot of that happened, then I think we can only it's only wise to look at the idea that they may be preparing for something else that's going to happen with a cyber attack or something like that may be coming in the near future. So we saw what happened in Texas last year when they went without power for a long time, and we even saw people die up on interstate. What interstate was that? 95, up going up the East Coast up through DC, where those people were stuck in their cars for like 2-3 days. Definitely want to be sure you always have some food and water with you if you take your car out and driving in the winter. Extra blankets, flashlight, stuff like that. It's just always a good idea, especially when you're having inclement weather. And it's good to have kind of that same idea for around the house. Have a kerosene heater, have a propane heater, something portable. Be able to keep yourselves warm. Some food that you can heat up easily, a little sterno, something like that. You never know, especially with the threat of you got all these new meters going in. It seems like it would be a good target for hackers, for people attacking the electricity grid. It also seems to me that it gives people attacking the electricity grid a eye into your world here. So if somebody was able, in fact, to hack into the main system, they would also probably be able to get into your house and see what the main people are seeing. And I'm trying to see what we got here. I think we got some kind of critter outside or something. It's snowing like crazy. Dogs are going crazy. Let's see if I still got my cam going right. Whoops, sorry about that, Tim. I dropped you out there. But yeah, I think that's what we'll be looking for a next episode, or a very soon, upcoming episode will be the cyber attacks and what that might look like. So one more quick semi-local story I wanted to bring up. There are elaborate unconventional warfare exercises set for undisclosed sites in North Carolina. Oh, wait a minute. This is from 2020. So I pulled up the wrong one. But this is this is going on right now again too. They're having a a exercise. Let me pull up the right one from January 2022, January 10th. This is from the Charlotte News and Observer, and it's called Exercise Robin Sage. It's a realistic guerrilla war will be fought across 24 North Carolina counties this month, with young soldiers battling seasoned quote-unquote freedom fighters, according to the U.S. Army. The 2-week unconventional warfare exercise will be staged January 22nd through February 4th on privately owned land, and it will be realistic enough to include sounds of gunfire, which are blanks and flares, the U.S. Army John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School said in a news release. Exact times, locations, and exercise specifics are not provided. But I thought that was a pretty interesting story. It kind of reminds me of a video I saw many years ago. I think it was in a foreign country where there was a military assault happening, and they were going through an urban area, and they were blaring out on loudspeakers, "This is not an assault. This is not an assault." And meanwhile, they were rolling through the town, taking it over, and they really didn't even have to get violent because people were like, "Oh, it's not an assault." And So I wonder if anybody else kind of got that vibe. It is a normal thing for the Army to do this thing, but we hear since President Biden was in office, his Attorney General, and he said that white supremacism and Republicans are the biggest threat to the country now. And then you see the Army is going to be training their young soldiers to fight quote unquote aged and freedom fighters and experienced freedom fighters. That's not giving me some very good vibes there. What do you think about that?
I think there's a pattern that anytime the government rallies for well, I guess I can give an example would do this better. Anytime a group gets a power of some form, it's always used against them. Like we wouldn't have had any like the Patriot Act or anything like that if it wasn't for Bush, right? Then they used like Arab fear on the right to get all that stuff going. And now all that stuff like that came out of the Patriot Act and stuff is being used against a lot of the people that were involved in January 6th. So anytime you get something going, it's eventually going to get used against your side. So I don't know why these like super radicalized people ever go on the side of helping the government. It really never makes sense. Like it's going on right now. Like why? Like if I was an Antifa, for example, why in the world would I ever pick a side? It doesn't make any sense because they're eventually going to come after you. So if they're training for like guerrilla warfare and unconventional activity, and they've got people in the back of like F-150s and stuff, they're probably not going to go after the Republicans because the Republicans really haven't come out in giant numbers unless it's a Trump rally. And meanwhile, you have most of the people on the left that's going around doing the firebombing, the auto zones, and that sort of thing. So that's the people they're going to use it against. We've got 3 years left of Kamala, and she was a corrupt like police officer. What was it? Is it
she
DOA
was
or
a
whatever?
state's attorney or a attorney general of California, and the
She's
district attorney from San Francisco.
So what are the odds? What are the odds that now we have a corrupt law enforcement person in charge of the country that maybe they're going to inflate the military, maybe they're going to inflate the state police, for example. Like, I think people are always shocked when they come to Tennessee and they see how many state troopers we have. Like, because it's not really that way like it is in Virginia. But like a heavier state presence from the police, in my opinion, isn't a good thing. I think police is something that you're supposed to keep local. Otherwise,
I think we even have a provision in the state constitution for Tennessee that we don't have a state police force, and that's why they have the highway patrol instead of the Tennessee State Police. But we still have the Tennessee Highway Patrol. We still have the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. So if those aren't state police agencies, then I don't know what the hell they are. But yeah, I wonder about that, Tim, because I said the same or something similar during the riots of 2020. I said, you know, these DAs are not prosecuting these people for these crimes right now, but if it becomes expedient for them to do so, right now there are these Antifa and the BLM rioters who were burning storefronts and blocking off cities and stopping traffic and jerking people out of cars and things like this. They weren't being prosecuted, but don't think that at any time, if the state finds it, useful, that they won't prosecute you. So be really careful out there, guys. Whichever side of the aisle you fall on, I would always advise against committing any kind of political violence, because it will be used against you. You may feel like you're making some kind of gain in the short term, but it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. It's only going to get yourself, it's going to make you a target. It's going to make whatever group you may be a part of, it's going to make it easy for the feds to go after them if and when they decide to do so. And we've got crazy snow going on here up on the Iron Mountain, and we've got folks outside. So there's a guy walking around on the street here, and my dogs are going insane. And
get a snow shot.
My dogs love getting out in the snow. Do yours?
Well, no, they're Dachshunds. They're awful.
Well, dude, mine are like little
really
kids, man. They get out and as soon as there's like a little bit of snow on the ground, they want to get out and run in it and just, toss it.
It's probably going to be noisy, but I'll give you a turn around. This is about how much I got right now. I got a little.
I can see a little. Looks like you got like an inch or two there. It's supposed to continue on all night tonight, so we'll see. I'm sure my dogs are picking up on this mic pretty bad. So I've hit just about everything that I wanted to hit tonight. So we'll be looking at, in future episodes, we'll be looking at the hack attack and the cyber scramble. But the Clever Together is where I believe we are now. We've gone through Lockstep, and Clever Together is being implemented. So let's look for the signs of that. Y'all check that out. I'm not going to do it right away, but I will put this in the description. And y'all holler at me at theironmountainhour@gmail.com if you got any pertinent info, if you got any corrections for me, if you have any guests you want to suggest, or if you'd like to be on the show, or if there's something that you'd like to see on the show. And remember, hit that chat in those comments. Would you help somebody in a snowstorm? And in the upcoming episode we're going to do, would you pick somebody up, a hitchhiker? Have you ever picked a hitchhiker up? And I want to hear your hitchhiking stories. So that'll be on an upcoming episode where we don't have to do what?
There's hitchhiker conspiracies. Like, when we come back and talk about hitchhikers, we can bring up the idea that all the hitchhiking conspiracies, like hitchhiker killers, were an attempt to end the beatnik culture. Because out west, the hitchhiker, it's a much different vibe than it is on the east. Like, I know we have a little bit more fearfulness or hesitation about hitchhikers, but they really don't seem to care out west. It's very normalized.
My brother Josh just texted in the chat that he has more snow down in South Carolina than we have up here.
Oh.
But he's just a couple hours over the hill there, so he's not really that far south than us. But yeah, it's starting to pick up here on the mountain a little bit more than what you got. I did see our roads covered again. This morning, my stupid car had traction control that I had to turn off to get out of my driveway. As soon as I would get it up enough spin to get the wheels in there and pull myself up the hill, the traction control would kick in. It wouldn't let me get over 1,500 RPM, so I couldn't spin the tires at all to get up the hill. Turned it off, went right up it. Thought, what a useless tool that is.
More stuff going on. See, I guess is he more just straight over?
Pretty much.
East of us.
Yeah, pretty much straight over the mountains. And man, those mountains are pretty wild if you look at them from above. If you check out Google Earth and go across the Appalachians in our area, they're just like strips across there, and it's no wonder they look the way they do when you're driving down between them. But pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But yeah, well, that's about it for tonight. Tim, you gotta leave us with a final word there before we finish for the evening.
My final word would be that I have noticed on some Appalachian Mountain threads, and that would be on actual online, and some on Facebook. There seems to be some animosity coming from the western mountains of Colorado and I guess you would call the Olympians and all those sorts of mountains, that the Appalachian Mountains are stubby. They're stubby because
That's
they're
right.
old. But this is an argument I would like to squish, that this is mountain envy.
Yep.
The West is mad because everybody's coming back to the Appalachians because we have a little bit more freedom when it comes to the political COVID stance and stuff. And now that the West Coast mountains are used to nonstop tourism, from skiing rich boys to mountain dwellers to weed tokers to psychonauts and all manner of rich shoppers and stuff. And now they're all flocking to the Appalachians. And you're just mad that they can come here and have a good time with our stubby little mountains, and they're leaving your big
And we've
mountains
got Sugar
behind.
Mountain and
Much love to Colorado, though.
yeah, we got the local ski resorts here.
There does seem to be a little bit of animosity coming from the West Coast about the Appalachians. I do
Yeah,
think
it
it's
is funny. And that's funny as there's there's like people on Reddit groups who will try to get an idea on where they should move, and a lot of these mountain hipsters are looking at coming here, and my wife will get on there under her throwaway account and be like, don't move here, it sucks. But
well, I really don't.
I agree,
because it's not the same vibe. It's more of an
I
isolated
do think we'll
vibe,
see,
whereas the
though.
Western vibe is about
I do think we'll see with the casino coming in Bristol. With casinos, we know what comes with that. We see prostitution and drug use kind of go with those things. Not that they are happening in the casino, although maybe in some cases they are. But when people strike it rich really quick and walk out of a room with a whole bunch of money, a lot of times that's what they do. You saw the video of the guy saying he was going to get hookers and blow, or whatever he said, when he won the lottery. Well, there's a lot of people around casinos who have that mentality. So when we see the casino come in, I feel like we're either going to have to really look at decriminalizing or legalizing, which we already have to a large degree. I think the cops they write you a ticket for marijuana if it's under a half an ounce. They don't even send it off to have it checked to see if it is marijuana. So they've definitely gotten more lenient on that. But with drugs and prostitution, they're going to have to make some sort of exemption for that, or look at that going forward, because those things will pop up around the casinos. And do we want to have drugs full of
weed will be legal already? On the Virginia side of Bristol, the weed will be legal
that's probably
already.
likely. Yeah, so
I don't see a way to avoid prostitution, though, because the only reason prostitution pops up in areas where there's suddenly a lot of opportunity to make money so quickly, aka Vegas, where all the casinos are, is because you have, I guess there's no nice way to say it, and you have low-class people that look good, and that's an easy way to make money, to go strip a little, to give up the bud, or whatever you want to call it. And I don't see how you can get rid of prostitution. I don't know the answer to that.
I think there's been a lot of people smarter than you and me try, and it's called the world's oldest profession for a reason.
Give it a try, a good college try.
Well,
it's a weird thing to weird hill to die on. But.
Well, in any case, I do think we'll have to be looking at that in our area, unless we want to have our courts and our judges filled up with people involved in those things. So anyway, that'll be something we'll keep an eye on looking forward as we go into 2022. This is our third show of the year, I think. No, this is our second show of the year. I don't know. But anyway, we're just getting started in this year. We really want to help make this show grow. We want to reach more people. We want to have a conversation. We want you to be in on the conversation. We want you to call in. We want you to give us your ideas for what you want to see in the show, because this show is it's basically whatever Tim and I want it to be. So if you give us something that we find interesting and then we think should be included, we'll put it on there. And if you have any guest suggestions, let us know at theironmountainhour@gmail.com. I'll put that in the description of the video so you can hit us up. I will also be creating some sort of page. I'll let you know on the next video, whether it be Discord or Gilded or Reddit or what have you. you guys send me emails or put it in the comments if you have any ideas on which of those you prefer. By the next video, I'll have an answer for that, which way we're going to go and what we're going to do. I'll let you know. That way we can get a hold of each other if we're banned from YouTube or whatever, and we can, whenever we set up on the new platforms that we're going to, whether it be Rumble or Odyssey or whatever it is we decide to use, where we can stream most effectively, reach people most effectively, and avoid the censors most effectively. That's what we'll do. So be sure to stay tuned, subscribe, like, share, comment on it, and be sure to come back next week at 10 p.m. every Sunday. We'll be here. Thanks for joining me, Tim. See y'all next time.